Hey folks, this week we're studying rhyme and related sound patterns. And I'm going to keep this short. Really, I'm just going to review some of what Sharon Hamilton talks about in essential literary terms. And I recommend that you watch this video after you've read that section, starting on page 235 and going through page 248, and maybe look through the examples at the ends of those sections, and then come back and watch this video. So when most people think about poetry, they think about rhyme. If you stop an average Joe on the street and say, "What defines a poem?" They'll say, "Words that rhyme." And that's not at all necessarily the definition of a poem, but it is a characteristic of a lot of poetry, and certainly a lot of poetry written before the 20th century. The definition is simply a repetition in two or more words of the last stressed vowel and all the syllables that follow it. So that stressed vowel is important here. Hamilton talks about some of the potential effects that rhyme can have on us as listeners or readers. This is almost a cliche of old-fashioned literary criticism that all of these characteristics of poetry and of other literary forms create unity. The work of art is that which is coherent, that in which all the pieces hang together. And I think that this can be an effect of rhyme. But I think it's more important to focus on how rhyme can link ideas or possibly pose contrasts between ideas in the words that rhyme. It can also, of course, put stress on particular words, and it can lighten the tone. Sometimes rhyme comes across as funny, lighthearted, kind of entertaining. Hamilton categorizes rhyme into these different categories. Hamilton also describes some categories of rhyme. The most obvious is end rhyme, which is where the ends of the lines rhyme with the ends of other lines in the poem. But we also have internal rhyme, where within a single line or across multiple lines, we have words that rhyme closely. And then we have off rhymes, I rhymes, and slant rhymes, and these are synonyms for the same thing. These are words that look like they should rhyme, but in fact are pronounced slightly differently. And so it has some of the effect of rhyme, but also can be a little bit jarring. Alliteration is the other sound pattern that I think most students sort of instinctively understand. And this is the repetition of consonant sounds in nearby words. Hamilton defines it as the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginnings of words, but I want to quibble with that a little bit and suggest that when a consonant sound occurs in the middle of a word, it can also have the same effect of repeating that sound in a way that draws the attention of the eye or the ear. This can also create unity. It can also link words and concepts. It can also give emphasis and can sometimes exaggerate the sound or the effect that the author is trying to have. And it can also have an onomatopoeic effect, and I'm going to talk about onomatopoeia in just 1 minute. This is a consonant sound that reflects or reinforces the meaning of the lines. And so Yeats, in the poem The Lake Isle of Innisfree, says, "I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore." And in this case, the alliteration is happening with the L, lake, lapping, low, but that is also onomatopoeic because it is replicating the sound of the shore, because it is replicating the sound of the water lapping gently against the shore. might also think about Shakespeare's line in Midsummer Night's Dream, quail, crush, conclude, and quell. This is about violence. This is about conflict. And so the repetition of that k sound, whether it's spelled with a Q or a C, has the effect of giving emphasis to the very meaning of the words. Consonance is one of those concepts that some students seem to struggle, maybe just to remember exactly what it is and to distinguish it from assonance. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds in words or syllables that contain different vowel sounds. And so the consonant at the beginning and the end of the word is the same, but the vowel changes in the middle. The effects really depend the effects really depend very much on context. You might look at Sharon Hamilton's description of consonants again to see some examples of the many different kinds of effects that it can have. As with alliteration, it can also have an onomatopoeic effect where it reflects or reinforces the meaning of the words. Leave thy vain bibble babble, Shakespeare says in Twelfth Night. And the bibble and babble, that's where we have the consonants, where the consonant sounds are the same. It's only the vowel, the I and the ah, that changes between the repetition. And if what he's getting at here is leave aside your nonsense, your silly words, leave aside your nonsense, your silliness, then bibble babble has the effect of conveying that nonsense. This is almost like the sound that a baby might make when it's just talking gibberish words. This is Wilfred Owen's poem Clearances. Taught me to hit, taught me to loosen, taught me between the hammer and the block to face the music. Teach me now to listen, to strike it rich behind the linear black. This is an interesting effect. This is an interesting example of how consonants can create contrast and can also link these words. Loosen, listen. The consonant at the beginning and the consonant at the end stays the same, but we change the vowel in a way that implies that there's some sort of relationship here between loosening and listening. Block and black is also an example of consonants. And then finally, another one that I've noticed students struggling with over the years, so this one might be one worth paying attention to and reading this section of essential literary terms carefully, but assonance is very similar to alliteration, except rather than a consonant sound repeating, it is the repetition of a vowel sound. Alliteration is easier to hear. I think that's maybe why students struggle sometimes with assonance, because the repetition of a vowel sound is not as immediately obvious. It doesn't strike the ear quite as self-evidently. So it's the repetition of vowel sounds. Like all these other effects, it can create unity, it can create links between words and concepts, and it can give emphasis. And it can also have an onomatopoetic effect. Thou foster child of silence and slow time. Child, silence, time. You hear that long I sound repeating in all three of those words. And so it's creating a link between those. It's creating unity throughout this line. Another quick example, a hand that can be clasped no more. I was trying, as I read that, to emphasize the repeated vowel sounds. Hand, that, can, clasped. It just has the sense of pulling together this whole line and giving emphasis to it because we get that repetition of the vowel sound. And then finally, she talks about onomatopoeia. This is my least favorite word to write on the board while the whole class is watching because I always have to stop and remind myself how it's spelled. These are words that imitate the sound they denote. They seem to exemplify what they denote, and it can create associations between the sounds of words and their meaning. A tap at the pane, the quick, sharp scratch, and blue spurt of a lighted match. Notice we have rhyme here with scratch and match rhyming. We do have some assonance, tap, scratch, match. All of those have that same ah sound, but we also have some onomatopoeia. Sharp and scratch both sound a bit like something tapping against a window pane. And then the blue spurt of a lighted match, even the word match itself kind of sounds like striking a match against the matchbook. And so this is a good example of how onomatopoeia is using the sounds of the words to convey the meaning of the words. The second definition of onomatopoeia on the left here is a more abstract one, the words that seem to exemplify what they denote. And I think this poem from Gerard Manley Hopkins, God's Grandeur, is a good example of that. It's not the sound of the words, but the repetition of the word trod. Generations have trod, have trod, have trod. It conveys this sense of exhaustion, this sense that the reader has to go through something like what the speaker of the poem or what these generations that the speaker is discussing have gone through. The repetition of treading, of putting one foot in front of the other over and over again. I hope that helps clarify some things. I hope that helps clarify some of these concepts. If you have questions, write them down. We will go over them again very briefly in Monday's class, and then we will spend Monday and Wednesday reviewing these concepts and looking at some specific examples and talking through what kind of effect they have. Take care.